Hi, my name is Christina Siwek and I'm with Engel and Völkers. I wanted to start a buyer representation series that explains showing agreements, employment agreements, and who pays the agent. So as I've said, I'm Christina Siwek with Engel and Völkers, and today I'm starting a buyer education series because buying a home has changed and buyers deserve a clear explanation, not confusion. If you've been asked to sign something to see a home, or you're wondering who pays the buyer's agent now, this video will walk you through this step by step. So first, let's start with the buyer broker agreement to show property, because there's two that you will encounter. There's the buyer broker agreement to show property and the buyer broker exclusive employment agreement. So the buyer broker agreement to show property is more of a limited scope agreement. Let's say something that you would do like you're entering into a first date. The buyer wants to know if they really feel comfortable working with you as their buyer's agent, and the agent wants to know if they're comfortable and if they really vibe working with you. So it's a great place to start for both sides. So the buyer broker agreement to show property, let's pull that up. So this is something very simple that you would put your name here as the buyer. The broker would be, in my case, Engel and Völkers, and then I would put my agent name here. And then you would look down here to lines 16 and 17, and that's where you would discuss compensation. Remember that compensation is completely and always has been negotiable, but you want to look at this form as a limited scope agreement. It's not a long-term agreement. So when you would put the dates in up here, you know what we typically do when we start acting as your representative. So we start looking at properties online in the MLS. We start advising you with what to do with the buying process. We should have one of these employment agreements in place with you, whether it's the show property agreement or the buyer broker employment agreement. So the purpose is pretty simple. It allows a licensed agent to legally show you a home. So we would typically pick a date here that's about 72 hours, you know, something smaller scope that allows us as your agent to explain the process, and it creates transparency if you decide you want to move forward. It's important for you to note as a buyer that you do not have to pay a retainer to sign this agreement. Retainers are optional and not required, and many buyers never pay one. Okay, what the showing agreement does not do or mean, it doesn't mean that you're locked into working with that agent long-term. You do not owe them money for just touring homes, and you can't change your mind. You 100% can change your mind, which is why we typically do ours for just an agreement that's about 72 hours, 24 to 72 hours to show property. It simply gives permission for the agent to show you property and help you understand the process. Okay. Something else that I just want to take a sidebar here to notate, I've heard that buyers have felt that they needed to sign buyer broker agreements or a form to go into open house. You do not need to do that. I want to clear up that big misconception. You do not need to sign a buyer broker agreement to walk through a public open house. If you are standing in a home that's open to the public, you do not need to sign anything to just walk through it. An agreement is only required when an agent begins to act on your behalf. When an agent, or if you want that agent to represent you beyond that one home, or if you want that agent to write an offer for you on your behalf, okay? So I just wanna make sure that I get that misconception cleared up. All right, the next step would be the buyer broker exclusive employment agreement. All right, let's take a look at that. So again, very similar. This is going to be more detailed, okay, in what we're looking at. So again, buyer's name, broker name, Engel and Völkers, my name, Christina Siwek, and it's going to be more specific. What are we looking at? Residential, land, commercial, agency, relationship, and then also compensation, right? So compensation, is it 3%? Is it 2%? And then is it a flat fee? You know, you want to understand what you negotiate with your agent. So you start to enter in this agreement once you're serious and you decide that, yes, I want that agent to represent me. I'm going to enter into the buyer broker exclusive employment agreement. It's a true employment agreement, and it means that that agent exclusively represents you. So you can't work with another agent. It's just that one agent. Okay, that agent guides you from the offer to the closing table, and the compensation agreement in writing, it's clearly defined. So what you've agreed to pay them for working for you on your behalf is what this employment agreement is for. Again, no retainer is required to sign this agreement unless both parties agree to have a retainer, okay? But you do not need one. Agent compensation, I think right now is still confusing a little bit. So let's clear it up. buyer agent compensation is not set by law. It's fully negotiable. It's only due if the agent that represents you in a purchase follows through and actually you close on a house, right? Buyer's agents were never free. What's changed now is that compensation is now transparent and documented up front. A lot of times I would hear buyer's agents say, I'm free. There's no cost associated with me. That was never true. It was always associated in the seller's bottom line. And it's always been negotiable, always been negotiable. So just know that. However, you can, so these two forms, let me back up. These two forms state that you owe your buyer whatever agreed upon compensation that you've agreed to. Now you can ask the seller to help you with that compensation and perhaps cover it all. How do you do that? You do that in a seller compensation addendum. So that's this form. So you state the date, the buyer, the seller, and the premise, okay? And you say it's a sale or maybe it's a lease. But if it's a sale, you say, I gave my buyer compensation was for 3%. And so that is what I would like you, seller, to cover for my buyer. Now they may say yes, they may say no. But what you really need to know is that this is a direct agreement that the sellers can still pay for buyer agent compensation, right? So I think before, yes, the seller was paying, the listing brokerage rather was paying for your buyer's agent's compensation. Now, sellers still can, but it's through a form that we're calling the seller compensation addendum, or SCA. This addendum is usually attached to the purchase contract, allows the buyer to ask for the seller to pay some or all of the buyer's agent's compensation. We typically like to ask them to pay all, can credit that amount to your buyer at closing. Yes, through the seller compensation form, can credit the buyer the amount of their commission at closing. I just want to be specific about that. Not any other concession or compensation. They can pay for your buyer's agent at closing through this addendum. It's separate from any seller concessions. That's what I was just sort of dabbling into. It's separate from the buyer asking for the seller to pay any seller concessions. And we'll get into that in a different video. So just a simple breakdown. The showing agreement, short-term, flexible, no retainer required. The employment agreement is full representation, negotiated compensation upfront. They both are. Seller compensation addendum is how buyers ask sellers to pay the buyer agent fee. And again, it's always negotiable and you can always ask the seller to cover your buyer's agent fee, okay? At least in the state of Arizona. Nothing's automatic, everything's negotiable, and you should always understand what you're signing. It's so important to understand what you're signing. Your agent should be able to explain it to you frontwards, backwards, forwards, sideways, whatever. Buying a home is one of the largest financial decisions that you will ever make. You deserve clarity before you have commitment. In the next video, I'm going to go deeper into the buyer-broker agreement to show property with real-life examples, when it's used, and when it's used, we're going to go deeper into that form specifically. So I'm actually going to be going through that form line by line in the next video. Okay, but I just wanted to go through this process. I wanted buyers out there or sellers that are going to be buyers to feel more comfortable with why we have the buyer, why we have the showing agreement form, why we have the exclusive employment agreement form, and what is a selling compensation addendum, and how is that different to seller concessions. And so as I work through this series, I'll be going to sellers after this series is over, but I think I have about 10 videos lined up for this series. We're going to go over the buying process step by step. So thank you for tuning in. More and more of these. And hopefully as I do more and more of these, I will get even better with this technology. It's been a minute, but I just felt that we needed more education. We need more education in this industry. So hope you enjoyed it. My name is Christina Siwek with Engel and Völkers. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe. Until next time.